Just before we move into the making of something, sculpting of something, if you can, just take a minute, either in the chat, make a note of the seeds that you just discussed in your group. Either share a drawing or write something in, so we have a feel for what these seeds are that are coming through us right now and coming forward as we move into crystallizing. And so that's how these final 2 sessions will go. We'll be crystallizing what the seeds are that are touching and shifting and moving through each of us. And then we'll be back in our organizational teams talking about how sharing what we are thinking, each of us individually, and thinking about how the organization will support what's emerging in each of us. So I want to say just a little bit about the exercise. This is the one that involves sculpting. And also to just sort of point us to where we are now in our process and why this experience of working with our hands, trying to stay out of our heads, and just working at a more intuitive level is part of sticking with the growth that's not obvious, right? So as John indicated earlier, as a result of all of our conversations, sensing into ourselves and each other and listening and stories and big ideas, and we have these seeds and they're just sort of poking, waving at us right now. And I love this image. This is from Chris Liuzzo, by the way. I love the image of the crack. Chris brought this image of, and the power of the crack, that sometimes these little flickers, they're just kind of waving at us. And sometimes they're coming in through the places where there's the most pain or there's the most possibility, but they're often really tiny. And to me, it connects to this encouragement by Howard Thurman that there is in you something that waits and listens for the sound of the genuine in yourself. That is the only true guide you will ever have. And so some of us have been able and willing to share some amazing artifacts that you've made that are a part of listening to that guide, listening to that voice, listening to what's coming from a different place. And Sanaya, this is the image that you made last week, and I thought it would be great if you would just give voice to what this image was saying to you. And Sanaya might need to be unmuted, Linda.
What after like sitting through the pathfinders and immersed in their profound, all those sessions, the citizenship discussion really sparked some introspection in me. And this is what came out when I wrote this in the chat. In the corridors of my mind, I envisioned a state where the barriers of nationality and citizenship fade into the recess of collective consciousness. I want to be unburdened by bureaucratic delineations and witness the dismantling of autocratic fortifications, allowing the free flow of interconnected thoughts and shared humanity.
Thank you so much, Sanaya. Each one of the artifacts that you've brought have so many levels of meaning. It is as if they come from a different place. And so what we're going to work on as we move forward is related to this notion of, yes, we have seeds, yes, we have sparks, we have tendrils, we have threads of what might want to be born, and we have the experience often of being stuck. And so this process of sculpting supports us to see where we might feel and be rather stuck in our current situation, and what might be the most intuitive sense we can give to moving, to taking the next steps. And so here's a few things about stuck that's just important to know before we get into our groups. Stuck is a vital part of any creative process. This is not about you. It's part of a set of circumstances, right? So one reason that we all often feel frozen where we are is the circumstances that surround us are actually paralyzing and overwhelming, and it's just a part of what is holding us in the place that we're in. So the idea is, if I can listen more closely to my stuck, it might shift, right? And we've talked about shifts from the very beginning. And then I might discover more degrees of freedom. So I might be more able to not only imagine better what I want to grow, but actually feel that I can step into that possibility. And then I can capture the insight that emerges from deeper sources of knowing. So we'll be listening for insight in this process, in this exercise. And John started us off already by indicating that what we're also doing now is exploring other ways of knowing throughout these sessions. And so, in a nutshell, I won't repeat what John said already, but in a nutshell, we are holding multiple forms of knowledge in equal regard, and we're capturing insights that emerge from deeper sources of knowing. And so in a few minutes, you're going to go into groups of 3, and you're going to go through a process of making a sculpture 1. And I'm going to give you really specific instructions in 1 minute. You're going to build a model of sculpture 1. If you can remember to, give it a name. And if you can remember to, take a photo of sculpture 1. Then you're going to share with other people what that sculpture looks and feels like for you. Then you'll build a model of sculpture 2, give it a name, and take a photo. If you can, you want to try to notice where the movement from 1 to 2 began in the hands. So what do you notice when it's time to shift from 1 to 2? What is it that's the first move that you make, that your hands make? Because there may be some insight there. And we'll be listening for what insights or questions arise. And if we can connect to new degrees of freedom or movement. So we have some examples here as you move into your rooms. These are just some really simple versions. The old Play-Doh version, which is always available to us, every dollar store. Here's some examples of naming a sculpture 1, the wall, sculpture 2, looking out. And some of our objects will have particular meaning for us. And what happens in the shift from 1 to 2 is that it doesn't have to make any sense to anyone else but ourselves. So no one else needs to know what this means other than, wow, that's a pretty cool assortment of objects to work with. Some of you might have forgotten to gather some things, and so just take a hold of what's around you. So in a few minutes, you'll get into your groups. You're going to take about 3 minutes to just pick a couple of the objects and share why you think they called you to be a part of this process. And then everyone will just get still, and you will take 6 minutes. You'll have just a minute to get still, be quiet. Before you get into that, see if someone will agree to be a timekeeper, because the time does matter. So you just take a minute to get centered, and then you'll have 5 minutes and you'll all work quietly. So there's no talking in the 5 minutes. You take your objects, you put them in relation to each other, and you make your sculpture one, which is how the situation feels and appears to you now. Then you break your quiet, and you will each take 2 minutes each. So that will be a total of 6 minutes. And we'll be sending you little messages in the broadcast to let you know this. You'll each have 2 minutes to reflect out loud on sculpture one. What was that? What happened? What do you think needs to end and what wants to emerge? And then you have another 3 minutes of solo time. Each of you will work independently, quietly for 3 minutes to make a shift, to rearrange the objects that represent the next step that you might take, that you feel that your hands are telling you and leading you to consider as you move forward after this exercise. Okay, and then finally, you just have a few minutes to chat. What was that? What happened? What did we notice? And then we'll be calling you back together again. So, build a model of sculpture one, a model of sculpture two. Notice where the movement begins and what insights or questions arise.